Imagine you're the most powerful military on the planet. You have stealth bombers, satellite surveillance, the most advanced bunker-busting bombs ever built. And your enemy has buried their most dangerous weapons in holes so deep, so dispersed, and so carefully hidden across a country the size of Western Europe that you literally cannot find them all. That is the situation the United States faces right now. And the last time America tried to do something like this, it failed. Completely. So what happened then? What's different now? And most importantly, what does this war actually cost and who pays? Let's follow the money. 35 years ago, the United States assembled the most powerful military coalition since World War II. The mission was simple in theory: push Saddam Hussein's army out of Kuwait and restore order to the Persian Gulf. But inside the Pentagon, a quieter, more specific war was being waged, one that would ultimately end in failure and be almost completely hidden from the public. General Charles Horner, commander of coalition air forces, had one obsession above all others: destroy Iraq's Scud missiles. Not just the launch pads, not just the factories, all of it. Every warhead, every truck, every crew. U.S. intelligence had spent months mapping every known Scud site in Iraq. By December 1990, they had produced one of the most comprehensive military surveys in history. The conclusion was confident. With air superiority, the coalition could eliminate the threat. They were wrong. When Iraq began launching Scuds at Israel in January 1991, in the middle of an air campaign that had already dropped thousands of bombs, the Americans discovered something that would haunt military planners for decades. Mobile launchers are almost impossible to destroy from the air. The Iraqis were operating on a simple but devastatingly effective principle: drive the launcher to a field, fire the missile, drive away. The whole sequence took minutes. By the time a coalition jet arrived to strike the location, the launcher was already somewhere else on Iraq's road network. It was, as General Horner put it, like looking for a needle in a haystack, except the needle kept moving. Here's the economic punchline that nobody talks about. The United States spent more money trying to find Saddam's Scud missiles than Iraq spent building them. Coalition aircraft flew thousands of sorties. Intelligence analysts believe they destroyed fewer than a handful of confirmed mobile launchers during the entire 43-day air campaign. The rest of Iraq's arsenal was only dismantled months later, under UN supervision on the ground, after the war had already ended. The lesson should have been tattooed onto every war plan written after 1991. Air power alone cannot find and destroy a dispersed mobile missile force. 35 years later, that lesson is being tested again, at 10 times the scale. In late February 2026, the United States and Israel launched what analysts are already calling the most complex air campaign since World War II. Within the first week, over 3,000 targets across Iran had been struck. Command centers, naval installations, air defense systems, radar networks, logistics hubs, all hit. But the primary objective, the thing that President Trump publicly declared would be crushed, was Iran's missile program. And here is where the economics become staggering and where the history starts to rhyme. Iran's missile program is not a collection of weapons. It is a national industrial ecosystem, and it is the country's primary strategic deterrent. For a nation that has lived under severe economic sanctions for decades, cut off from Western weapons markets, unable to build a modern air force, the missile program was the logical answer to a simple question: how does a country protect itself when it cannot buy protection? The answer Iran landed on was to build deep, build dispersed, and build in volume. Start with the underground missile cities. Iran has spent 20 years excavating a network of tunnels and fortified storage facilities across the country, some burrowed as deep as 500 meters into mountain rock. These are not hidden bunkers. They are purpose-built military infrastructure, the Iranian equivalent of nuclear silos, designed specifically to survive an air campaign. American intelligence agencies spent years identifying these facilities via satellite imagery. The U.S. deployed B-2 Spirit stealth bombers carrying massive ordnance penetrators, the largest conventional bombs in existence, to collapse tunnel entrances and bury the contents. The strikes were impressive, but here's what the footage doesn't show. When you collapse a tunnel entrance, the missiles inside often remain intact. Buried, yes. Destroyed, not necessarily. If the regime survives, those missiles are potentially recoverable through excavation. The rubble is a storage problem, not a permanent loss. Now add the economic calculus. Each B-2 sortie cost roughly $130,000 per flight hour. Each massive ordnance penetrator runs approximately $170,000 per unit. Striking a tunnel complex that may or may not be occupied, may or may not contain missiles, and may or may not be permanently destroyed afterward, is an extraordinarily expensive gamble. And Iran knew this calculus before the war started. That is why they also moved. Before the first bombs fell, Iran executed a dispersal strategy that should terrify any air campaign planner. Thousands of missiles were relocated to Iran's western provinces using ordinary commercial trucks, vehicles completely indistinguishable, from the 400,000 commercial trucks operating on Iranian roads at any given time. There's no thermal signature, no radar cross-section, no satellite indicator that separates a truck carrying a ballistic missile from a truck carrying tomatoes. From an economic standpoint, Iran transformed its missile force into a distributed, invisible asset, one that cannot be priced into any airstrike budget because you cannot find it to strike it. Somewhere in western Iran tonight, a truck driver is pulling onto a dirt road in the mountains. The headlights go off, the engine cuts. Inside the trailer behind him is a ballistic missile. He will be gone before any satellite completes its next pass. This is not a special operation. This is Tuesday. And this is what America is trying to stop. So here's the real question, the one that the press briefings never ask directly. If America cannot find the missiles, what exactly is it bombing? The answer matters because the scale of what Iran has built makes the problem almost geometrically impossible to solve from the air alone. Consider the arsenal itself. Independent analysts estimate Iran's current missile inventory at somewhere between 6,000 and 8,000 missiles of various types and ranges. To put that number in human terms, that is more missiles than the entire NATO stockpile deployed in Western Europe at the height of the Cold War. And, crucially, no foreign intelligence agency can verify the true figure with confidence. Iran's deliberate opacity about the size of its arsenal is itself a strategic weapon. Uncertainty forces any military planner to assume the worst-case number and plan accordingly. The United States destroyed an estimated 40 to 50 fixed missile sites in the first week of strikes. Even if every one of those strikes was perfectly executed and permanently destroyed its target, that represents perhaps 1% of the overall threat. The math doesn't close. And here is the cost equation that makes it worse. Destroying one Iranian missile costs approximately the same as building another. Iran's Shahab-3 ballistic missiles run somewhere between $1 million and $3 million per unit. American precision strikes cost comparable amounts per weapon deployed. A war of attrition in which both sides destroy and rebuild at roughly equal cost. Launched from aircraft worth $2 billion each against tunnels that cost a fraction of that to re-excavate, is not a war America can win on economics alone. Iran covers 1.6 million square kilometers, mountain ranges reaching 5,000 meters, desert plateaus, deep river valleys, terrain purpose-built by nature for concealment. Mobile missile units operating in this environment can set up, fire, and relocate in under 15 minutes. American targeting systems typically require hours to move from intelligence observation to authorized strike. The gap between those two timescales is exactly where Iran's mobile force lives and operates. The economic cost of trying to close that gap, maintaining the surveillance density needed to track thousands of trucks across 1.6 million square kilometers, is ruinous. Reconnaissance aircraft, satellite time, drone hours, signal intelligence collection, all of it running simultaneously, all of it burning money. The United States is currently spending over $1 billion per day on this campaign. Sustained for a full year, that is $365 billion, more than the entire annual GDP of Iran itself. There's a perverse logic buried in that number. Iran is forcing the wealthiest military power in history to spend at a rate that Iran could never match. But that is also politically corrosive for a country whose president came to power promising fiscal discipline and an end to foreign entanglements. Here at Econ Empires, we follow the money. So let's talk about what no one in Washington wants to say out loud. This war is not just about missiles. It is about the global oil architecture, and the side that controls that architecture holds leverage that no bomb can provide. Iran sits astride the Strait of Hormuz, a 33-kilometer wide waterway through which approximately 21 million barrels of oil pass every single day. That is roughly 20% of all oil traded globally. When the United States and Israel began their strikes, Brent crude immediately spiked. Within 48 hours of the campaign announcement, energy markets had priced in a significant supply disruption premium. Every barrel of oil on the planet got more expensive simply because the risk went up. Now imagine what happens if Iran responds not by launching missiles at Israel, but by mining the strait, by targeting supertankers with anti-ship missiles, by coordinating with proxy forces in Iraq and Yemen to threaten pipeline infrastructure. None of these moves require Iran to win the air war. They require Iran only to make the global economy hurt enough that political pressure forces the United States back to the table. This is the economic judo Iran has been preparing for years. The missile program is not just a deterrent. It is the credible threat that gives Iran leverage over the strait. Destroy the missiles, and Iran loses that leverage. But if you cannot destroy all the missiles, and the evidence strongly suggests you cannot, Iran retains the threat indefinitely. Meanwhile, the consequences are already radiating outward. Global shipping insurance premiums for Gulf routes have surged. Cargo ships are rerouting around the Arabian Peninsula, adding thousands of miles and weeks of delay to supply chains already strained from years of disruption. Semiconductor manufacturers in Asia, which rely on Gulf petrochemical inputs, are quietly adjusting production forecasts. The dollar cost of this conflict doesn't stay in the Middle East. It moves through energy prices, through inflation, through supply chains, into the grocery bills of families in Sao Paulo and Stuttgart and Seoul. On the American side, the defense industry is experiencing a very different kind of moment. Raytheon, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, the companies building the bombs, the jets, the missiles, and the surveillance systems being deployed, have seen their valuations surge. Every Tomahawk cruise missile fired is a Tomahawk that needs to be replaced at roughly $2 million per unit. Every bunker buster dropped is a contract renewed. There's a constituency in the United States with a direct financial interest in this conflict continuing, and that constituency funds political campaigns. This is not a conspiracy theory. It is structural economics. And it reframes the central question entirely. The question is not whether America can destroy Iran's missile program. The question is, who can sustain the economic cost of this conflict longer? Iran is a country of 88 million people that has survived 4 decades of brutal sanctions. Its economy has been stress-tested by isolation in a way that few nations have ever experienced. Its government has demonstrated repeatedly that it will impose enormous costs on its own population to protect strategic capability. The missile program survived previous sanctions. It survived targeted assassinations of its scientists. It survived the Stuxnet cyber attack on its nuclear facilities. The United States, by contrast, is fighting this war while managing $36 trillion in national debt, a fractious domestic political environment, and a president whose core constituency was promised an end to exactly this kind of commitment. Economic attrition does not always favor the richer side. Sometimes it favors the side that can absorb pain longer. So where does this end? There are 3 credible scenarios, and none of them close with a clean American victory. In the first, the air campaign continues for months. Iran's launch rate falls, either from successful strikes or deliberate rationing. Washington declares partial success. The campaign winds down without a ground invasion. Iran's core infrastructure survives, damaged but intact, and over the following years it rebuilds, as it has done before. The bill lands somewhere between $200 and $400 billion. Oil markets stay volatile. The defense industry posts record profits. Iran emerges weakened but not disarmed. In the second scenario, the internal logic of the campaign forces the decision no one currently wants to make, a ground invasion. Former senior Pentagon officials have stated publicly that if the genuine objective is the complete destruction of Iran's underground missile infrastructure, ground forces are ultimately unavoidable. There is no bomb that can guarantee the destruction of a facility buried 500 meters in mountain rock. Only soldiers physically clearing tunnels can do that. The cost of this path is almost incalculable. Mountain terrain, 88 million people, no reliable allied ground force, no exit strategy, and a domestic political environment that has spent 20 years demanding an end to Middle Eastern land wars. For a president who campaigned on ending endless wars, ordering a ground invasion of Iran would be the defining irony of his time in office. In the third scenario, the United States steps back and hands the long game to Israel, which operates under the doctrine its planners call mowing the grass. The logic is cold and honest. You cannot permanently defeat an adversary committed to rebuilding. You can only degrade them periodically and accept that the cycle repeats. No end date, no defined cost ceiling. The grass keeps growing. The mower keeps running. The bill keeps accumulating. In 1991, the United States could not destroy Iraq's Scud fleet, a few hundred missiles in a country the size of California. In 2026, the target is up to 8,000 missiles in a country 4 times the size of Iraq, with 50 years of preparation behind it, and a government that has already proven it will absorb extraordinary economic pain to protect its strategic capability. The United States might win the air war, but the global economy might lose it, because history shows something uncomfortable about empires. The strongest armies in the world can destroy cities. They can destroy armies. They can destroy governments. But they struggle to destroy strategies that were designed specifically to survive them. And Iran's strategy, disperse, conceal, endure, was not built for this war. It was built for the last 30 years of preparing for it. That's the empire calculus. This is Econ Empires. If you want to understand the money behind the headline, subscribe. We'll keep following it. See you next one.